Hey guys, today's episode with Mike Donehey is presented by Compassion International. You need to go check out fillthestadium.com right now and help restore what COVID-19 has destroyed. 70,000 kids left in desperate need of help because of the pandemic. 70,000 kids in the Compassion programs needing your urgent support. Compassion has teamed up with our pro athlete friends to help release these kids and their family from poverty. And we are close. We are almost there. More than 60,000 seats have been filled of our goal to help 70,000 children. But we still got a long ways to go. We still have 9,000 seats we need to fill. And this is where you can come in and help provide essential food, medical care, and support for a child and their family during this pandemic. Check out fillthestadium.com today to learn more, to donate, and help release these kids from poverty. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Fillthestadium.com.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, former ESPN producer Jason Romano.
And welcome everyone to the show. I am Jason Romano. This is the Sports Spectrum podcast, bringing Jesus back into the sports conversation, the intersection of sports and faith. We're so glad to have you joining us here on the show today. Make sure you go check out sportspectrum.com. That is our home base. This podcast is there, as well as many of our other podcasts, including the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network shows. You can also find our devotionals there. You can also find stories every single day updated on the intersection of sports and faith, athletes, coaches, broadcasters. We want to bring Jesus back into the sports conversation. You can read all of our content for free at sportspectrum.com. And when you're there, make sure you sign up for our weekly newsletter. It is free. It comes once a week to your email inbox, and it updates you, keeps you posted on all of the different stories and articles and podcasts and devotionals that you may have missed during the week, because we're releasing a lot of content here on our website and on the Sports Spectrum social media pages. Well, we want to get that directly to you for free every Wednesday when you sign up for Sports Spectrum Weekly. It's our newsletter that comes to you each Wednesday morning. You can sign up for free. Just put your email address when you click that newsletter icon at the top at sportspectrum.com, and you are good to go. Sign up today. It is free at sportspectrum.com. We got a great conversation today with Mike Donehey, singer and songwriter. He was on our show back in September of 2019, and I met Mike a couple years ago at a conference that I was at in Utah, and I was just blown away by the talent of this guy, the depths of conversation that this guy can have, his thought process. I mean, to me, he is a preacher, a speaker, a singer, a songwriter, an entertainer, but deep down, he's just a dad and a husband who loves Jesus and wants to tell other people about Jesus as well. But he does it through music. He was the lead singer for 10th Avenue North for just about 20 years. 10th Avenue North formed in 2000 and announced in February of 2020 that they would be disbanding, that the band was no more, and Mike would be going off into this new solo career. Mike, of course, is a Dove Award winner, a multiple Dove Award winner. He's an author, Finding God's Life for My Will, and now he has a new album called Flourish that released in late August, and the first couple songs that I've heard before I could actually hear the whole album were fantastic, and this is Mike at his finest, really, as a solo artist. And we talk about a lot of things. We talk about COVID. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about COVID. We talk about pivoting into this new season of life, away from 10th Avenue North and into this solo career. We talk about the comparison of musicians and athletes. Heck, we even work in a little LeBron James and a little Beatles. I'm a huge Beatles fan. And really, I wanted to talk to Mike about writing a song and where that inspiration comes from, how he comes up with specific lyrics. I loved this conversation with Mike Donehey. We got to tape it in person in Utah at a conference a couple months ago, and it was wonderful to have Mike Donehey joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen. How you been, man?
Man, wild times.
Yeah.
Wild times. So
Crazy times, right?
I just went on this retreat, and I felt like a bunch of things that I knew in my head moved down into my heart region. You know how you know things, but you still just wrestle with them?
Yeah.
And there are these moments where it just feels like it gets down in you. And so I'm feeling great right
All right,
now.
so we're going there right in the beginning
Get
of this
right
conversation. Give me one example. You don't have to go into all of that if you don't want.
Okay,
But
no.
What do you mean when you say
as
that?
a music artist, I've always wrestled with jealousy and comparison. Always.
Yeah.
And I would pontificate, hey, listen, comparison is the thief of joy. You need to celebrate other people. That's the way out of comparison.
Right.
But still struggle with it, still wrestle with it. And I had this moment on this paddleboard in the mountains, and I felt like I heard, I'm for you and for them. And if I'm for you, then you need to be for them. And it was this weird thing of just all of a sudden it was gone. Just going, oh, there's enough. There's enough to go around.
Yeah.
So I imagine in the sports world it's even more pronounced because you have to beat the other team. There isn't enough to go around. Not all the teams can be great. There has to be one champion. In music, it's absurd to be where I was because nobody can listen to just one band 100% of the time. So
Right. No, that's really fascinating to think about because there is a lot of comparisons between the athletic world and the music world. Just the idea of competing, the idea of competing in front of an audience.
Yeah, that's true.
The idea of approval, the idea of achievement. There's a lot of similarities in
metrics. How many spins did you get? How many streams you got?
Right.
So
how many yards did you get? How many points did you score?
I feel like I'm in Moneyball sometimes. What's his stats? What are his stats doing right now?
That had to change. So I want to talk a lot of music with you too, because I've just been fascinated by the music scene and, formerly of 10th Avenue North, which has got to feel weird for you to even hear that, which we'll get into in a second. But I've been following, I'm a big Beatles fan. And, I've always enjoyed their music and really understood the history of how they evolved as musicians. But during COVID, I went back and watched the anthology, which is like 8 hours, and it takes you through their whole journey.
Can I stop you? Did you watch that movie yesterday where the guy... Yeah, he has a bike accident. He's the only one.
He's the only one who's ever heard of the Beatles. Great movie, by the way.
Me and my buddy were theater majors, and we actually had that idea for a script. And we go, are
you serious?
The genius is out there working.
Great idea. So you're a Beatles fan, I take it?
I like music.
Which means you love the Beatles.
Then I love the Beatles, yeah, of course.
But do you watch the trajectory of careers of musicians as a musician and kind of see what led them to their success and then what led them to even wanting to branch out on their own?
Absolutely.
You read about that?
Oh, yeah, especially, I guess that's where the comparison comes in is, we're playing shows and there's a band that's opening for us. And then a couple years later, that band or that artist is selling 10 times the tickets that we ever sold.
Right.
So you're going, what did we do wrong?
Yes.
What did they do right? And sometimes there's clear answers to that, and sometimes you go, it's a bit of a mystery.
I did see one of your endorsements for your book was from Ken Mansfield. And maybe you know Ken well, I presume, if he endorsed your book. And I've been reading his book about the last Beatles concert that he wrote. He wrote a book on the concert, the last concert that was on the rooftop, the famous concert that the Beatles had, knowing that this was kind of their last hurrah. And that they were ready to go into this new direction. Now, I am not a musician. I wish I could play any instrument. I'm sure if I taught myself, I could probably do something, but I've never been a musical guy in that realm. I can't sing, but I'm fascinated by the idea of a pivot in life. Yeah. And I had that. I had that when I left ESPN to come and do this with PAO and Sports Spectrum. You're kind of in a pivot right now.
Big time.
When you go from this band that's been around for 20 years and suddenly you're entering the solo world, take us through the pivot a little bit and kind of how that's been for you.
Yeah, the pivot started a couple of years ago when my drummer quit, and I had started the band with him 20 years ago, which is crazy to think about, 21 years ago.
Yeah.
And then he said, hey, I can't tour anymore. This is just too hard on my family. And he had kids first, so his kids were getting oldest the fastest. And And then it basically came down to a conversation I had with my wife. We were trying to cut back the number of shows we were doing because the way our band and the way our deal was structured, we weren't really making any royalties, or we weren't making any real mailbox money, is what they call it in the biz.
Yeah.
And to make money, we had to go play a show.
Yeah.
You know? It's like an athlete who doesn't have a guarantee. Like, you got to play or you don't get paid, right?
Yeah. That's the NFL, basically.
Yeah, basically. And so we go, man, we just got to be out on the road, We're cutting shows, and just wasn't enough. And finally I was talking with my wife and said, man, we need to we don't even know what the future's going to be, but we got to take at least a season off, just one season, right? And then maybe we'll pick back up. Well, once I told the other guys that, it was like they were waiting for those words to come out of my mouth. And they went, oh, me too. Actually. And my bass player goes, I'm actually going full-time into real estate when this tour's over, and I was waiting for a good time to tell you.
Oh.
And my guitarist goes, actually, my wife and I have been dreaming of moving to Florida and me starting a business out of our house. And our piano player is like, so it really freed us up. And, then we quickly made our spring tour a farewell tour, and then COVID farewelled our farewell tour. So that was a bit bittersweet, not getting to sort of say goodbye properly.
Yeah.
But during COVID, I really started pivoting, and I went, maybe I should just be a speaker, or maybe I should work at a church, or maybe I should produce albums, or maybe I should just go into songwriting full time. And
yeah,
man, I couldn't stop writing songs, and the songs I was writing felt special, and they felt like I need to share these. And so I did a Kickstarter, actually, because a bunch of my buddies goes, look, you need a new kind of deal. There's other record labels where if you pay to record the music, they pay to market it, and then you split the master. So you can actually be making money while you're sitting at home, so you don't always have to tour. I said,
I remember the Kickstarter.
Talk to me about this arrangement you speak of. And so they said, dude, you have so many fans from your last band, 10th Avenue North, you should just put out a Kickstarter video, and I bet you could fund your album, and then you could create a partnership with a label, and everybody wins. And so I did this Kickstarter, and it raised the money in 12 hours, which for me, when you have to pivot, you're going, okay, now am I going in the right direction? You know what I'm saying? You just got all these huge questions. And so for me, as I go, I think I'm supposed to do solo music now. And, everyone in the business said, no. You need to keep the band name.
Sure.
You've built this brand over all these years. You need to call yourself 10th Avenue North and just hire new guys.
Even if it's just you as a
Even
leader.
if it's just me. Because you're lead singer. You're 10th Avenue North anyway. And I said to the guys, hey, I don't feel good about that. And they even gave me their blessing. They said, well, it's cool. We get it. I said, man, if you guys are quitting, it's not 10th Ave anymore. So let's just tell people it's over. You guys don't want to do it anymore. I want to do solo music, and I'll just call it Mike Donehey. And then we can kind of end it and move on. So that's what I'm doing.
Was it weird recording that first song as just Mike Donehey?
I'd love to say it was. It actually was so much easier.
Wow. Because you're the only one,
it's me
right?
And a producer. Hey, do you like this? Yeah. Do I like this? Yeah. Record label. Do you like this? Yeah. Okay, great. Here we go. Where with a band, for better or worse, sometimes it makes things better. Sometimes it makes it worse. And then sometimes it just slows it down. Because you have to get 4 different guys to approve of the direction you're going.
Sure.
So, no, it was actually terribly easy. It was a lot easier. I get think of it as, ask LeBron, is it difficult just playing a one-on-one? And he'd probably go, no. Then all I got to do is worry about myself. Right. I can handle that.
Yeah. I like that you compare yourself to the Beatles and LeBron. We're in a good place here, Mike.
If you're going to compare yourself, you might as well go all the way.
Sure, I'll compare myself to Joe Rogan, and we'll just keep going here.
Why not?
The biggest podcast
same
host
format
in the world. That's right.
You're doing the same thing.
Are you a big podcast guy?
I have a podcast, actually.
I know you do. We're going to talk about that. But are you a listener or consumer of podcasts?
I do. My favorite podcast, I think, is Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History.
Are you listening to it right now?
Well, it's funny. We were talking about the Beatles, and
yes.
One of his episodes, he talks about, or maybe it's in his book Outliers.
It is about the 1,000 hour or 10,000 hours,
and
right?
They're the example.
This
idea that the Beatles just hit it No, they had gone over to, what country was it? Belgium?
I think they were in Hamburg, Germany, maybe?
Yeah, or maybe it was Germany.
Something like that.
And they were they were playing for 12 hours a day.
Insane.
You know, just...
Cover songs all day long.
Yeah,
boom,
and
boom,
you go,
boom.
oh. So then when they started writing their own music, they had this huge, expansive understanding.
Yeah, they had a foundation.
And it's kind of like Ed Sheeran. You know, Ed Sheeran, he put in all these hours busking.
Right.
He's just playing on the streets, and he's figuring out. He's basically like a researcher. He said he would, you know, he's playing things. He's trying to figure out, oh, what part of the song makes people stop and listen, and why do they, and what makes them stay for the whole song. And so he's basically testing out how to be a performer.
It's fascinating.
Because if this doesn't hold someone's attention walking on the street, you know, and that's a really great way to go about it.
That's fascinating too to think about it, because the music world is such a different world today than when you guys started 10th Avenue North, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, so is professional sports. I mean,
Also true.
Curry just signed a $215 million 4-year.
His second $200 million contract.
I mean,
First guy to ever do it.
I go, when I was in high school, I mean, 20 years ago even, that was not happening.
No.
So, yeah, it's a different time.
What's the biggest difference between today and, say, 2004? I picked that year because that's the year my daughter was born. In the music world for you, because I remember the streaming world, I think it really changed when Napster hit in 2000. I was watching a lot of documentaries during COVID, right? And I remember those times and thinking, oh my gosh, right, I can get the music on my computer and record it onto, or burn it. Remember, burn CDs?
Oh, yeah.
Burn it onto a CD and take it and listen to it that way.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And then streaming came and Spotify came and kind of changed the game. But is that what the biggest difference is for you? Because the music's kind of the music, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
I guess three things. One, the money just shifted dramatically. The money went to AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon.
Right.
Because as it goes to streaming, people don't even think about paying a monthly $50, $60, $100 cell phone bill.
Right.
But you ask them to pay $20 for an album and they scoff at you. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas before, if you told someone you got to pay $100 a month for your landline and $20 for this record, they go, oh yeah, I'm not going to pay $100 for a landline. That's absurd.
Right.
You know, so the money has shifted. There is money in music. It's just gotten out of the artist's hands. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Two, there's way more music because it's way easier than ever to make music. I mean,
right.
Talk about a revolution in the music industry. I mean, sports people listening to this, but, you know, Billie Eilish just upended the music industry because she made a Grammy-winning record in her bedroom with her brother on a laptop.
Right.
You know, so suddenly, I mean, you got guys with... Think about, it would be the same as if all of a sudden you didn't need a stadium to have a football game.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
It's crazy.
Think about all these guys who built studios and they've sunk millions and millions of dollars, and now you just need a good mic. And you can do it all from your laptop. You know, so because of that, there's so much more music, and the gatekeepers, so the gatekeepers used to be radio guys and record executives, and now the gatekeepers are kind of playlisters for Spotify and Apple and Amazon Music.
Right.
The guy who picks, because, I mean, I've watched it. If I get a song on a playlist, it automatically gets, you know, 100,000 streams.
Yeah.
And if it's just on my page, you know, it's infinitely less.
And you got to do a lot of more work or extra work to get it to people to listen to.
So in a way, it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
It's just the power's shifting and the money's shifting.
It's really fascinating. Now, the new album came out late August called Flourish.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Solo album, first solo album. Now, there's a couple songs. I'm guessing the singles that you've already released are going to be on this new album, because one of my favorites is All Together.
Yeah, great.
Which I'll give you, I don't know if you know this, but do you know who Dan Orlovsky is? So he's a football player, former football player, who's now an ESPN NFL analyst.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, sometime in late May, after your song is released, I see a tweet from Dan, and Dan's a great follow. He's got a lot of followers on Twitter, and him and I are good buddies. And he tweeted some of the lyrics to All Together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which was great. And I didn't know they were actually from your song because it had just come out.
Yeah.
So I copy and pasted it into Google, and out pops All Together by Mike Donehey. And I'm like, that's Mike's song. Let me go listen.
Yeah.
And then I watch your video, which is really cool, by the way. I'm glad that you made an actual video because videos aren't as prominent, I guess, today.
Yeah.
But it was a really well done video, and you could tell it was thought out in the way that you did it, walking through the rooms. But I just thought Dan Orlovsky tweeting about this new single All Together. And then I went and I read some of the lyrics, and I was like, wait a minute. There's a lyric, there's a line in this song that just blew me away. And it made me think about singer-songwriter Mike Donehey. So yeah, I love listening to your music. I love your voice. But the writing part, the line was, cracks are where the light gets in.
Yeah.
It's such a simple, basic line. But I was like, that is so prominent and prevalent into the society that we live in right now. We have to be able to show our flaws to allow people inside of us. Where does a lyric like that come from? When you're writing a whole song here.
Yeah.
But where does a lyric like that come from?
Yeah, well, that one I pretty much stole from Leonard Cohen.
Okay.
I mean, he says something really similar in a song. Basically that light gets in through the cracks, you know.
Okay.
And then I have another buddy who wrote it like the wound is where the light shines through. And honestly, I think they're both ripping from the Apostle Paul when he says, you know, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the all-surpassing power is not from ourselves. And so there's this idea of there's a book called Scary Close that I read by a guy named Donald Miller, and he talks about being so afraid to show your hang-ups, your insecurities, your shortcomings to other people. But if you don't show them, you actually don't get to be known, because grace only sticks to our imperfections. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, when we live in our shadow self, we gotta let that shadow part seen to let the light in, you know. So yeah, a lot of different people have riffed on the same.
Where's the idea for that song come from, like All Together?
So the idea actually started. There's a verse in this. There's a line in the second verse says, "I want a church that looks like 12 steps."
Yes.
And I have my best friend in the world is an addictions counselor, and we always talk about how he experiences God most profoundly. He says when a group of addicts get together, and they're 100% vulnerable, and they're met with 100% acceptance, and he said, that is the most powerful thing he's ever seen. And I said to my buddy, we were getting ready to write, we were listening to some different stuff, and I said, why is it that if you go to most churches, not all, but if you go to most churches, you'll hear a past struggle testimony, but you're not going to hear a current struggle testimony?
Right.
And I said, if it's a current struggle, then you got to go to a special group. And I've always said, man, I wish church would be okay being more like a 12-step recovery program. There's a really great ministry called Celebrate Recovery where they meet in churches. It's basically AA meets church.
We have one in our church in Connecticut.
Yeah, I just wish it was church. If you've ever been to one of the services, you go, this should just be called church.
Right.
But it's terribly awkward the first time you go because every person who gets on the mic has to say what they currently struggle with. Mm-hmm. And it's just this, when you first hear it, you know, hi, I'm Sue. I'm here to do the announcements. I struggle with lust and da-da-da-da. And you just, what? Wait, what? But then by the end, you feel so much more at home. You feel so much safer. You feel like there's hope for you, you know?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Let's take a quick break from our Sports Spectrum podcast conversation to tell you a little bit more about our partners and sponsors, Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. Compassion is about releasing kids from poverty in Jesus' name. And over the last year and a half, it's been a very tough go for all of us during this pandemic. But due to COVID-19, 70,000 kids and their families in compassion programs have been left in dire situations, and they need our urgent support. 70,000 is also the capacity of an average pro football stadium. And so here's what's happening. Compassion has partnered with our pro athlete friends to help fill the stadium, to fill a stadium worth of children in need, 70,000 kids in need. Now, you can go to fillthestadium.com right now to learn more and to donate and help these kids and their families during these critical next few months. Every donation helps fill a seat toward a year of needed support, talking about things like essential food, nutritional supplements, hygiene solutions, and medical screenings for COVID-19. Think about that. You can make this difference right now in a kid and their family's life by donating through compassion at fillthestadium.com. Mike Donehey is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. I want to ask you about 2020. It was the year that you're having your farewell tour, but you also got COVID.
Sure.
And there's a lot going on in that year for all of us to have to process. I want to hear spiritually what God was doing and working in you as you experience 2020, as you experience COVID, which is still going on, which is crazy to think about. I thought by this time it might be gone, but it's not. And we still have to work through that. But there's so much that happened last year. What was that like to try and process for you from a spiritual perspective? What was God showing you?
I think the biggest thing I learned was how to deal with my victimhood. I think whatever our industry is, I'll say music and sports, right? A lot can happen where you feel like a victim. You know, you feel like that trade didn't go your way, or that injury didn't go your way, or why did the radio station add that song and not my song? Well, having our farewell tour just obliterated, canceled, and then being home, having no idea what I was going to do.
Right.
And then getting COVID on top of it, I felt like a victim. I felt like I have the hardest life of anyone that's ever lived. And there's this reality that we can actually fall in love with our victimhood. So I don't know how familiar you are with stories about Jesus, but we were just talking about it a second ago. Jesus is always coming up to paralyzed people and blind people. He goes, well, what do you want me to do for you?
Right. He's asking.
And it's a weird question. You go, well, of course they want to get healed. I don't think that's always the case. I've met people who are so safe and in love with their victimhood that they actually don't want to change, because they've actually, and I'm sure you've met people.
Sure.
They've built an identity on the wrong that has befalled them. It becomes who they are. So to be set free from that is actually terrifying. C.S. Lewis writes about this in The Great Divorce. But we can actually build our identity around our victimhood. And I started doing that during 2020. Oh, man. I started really settling into my victimhood. And then I read this quote. It says, "The secret to peace is embracing your current circumstance as if you had chosen it." Let me say that again.
Yeah.
The secret to peace is embracing your current circumstance as if you had chosen it. C.S. Lewis says it this way in the Screw Tape Letters. He says, "The present is the only point where time touches eternity." In other words, all that to say, in other words, until I embrace where I am, I'm still resisting where I am. And if I'm resisting where I am, I'm a victim to it. I'm a victim to my circumstance. And I actually can't change anything when I'm resisting where I am. But the second I embrace where I am, even if it's hard, even if I hate it, even if it sucks, the second I embrace it, now I can actually interact with it. Now I can actually coexist with God. Now I can actually start to problem solve. Now I can wake up to what's around me. The second I start going, okay, I don't embrace what has happened. I don't embrace the path that got me here.
Sure.
But in time, I did. That's usually like a rear view thing.
Right.
You start to appreciate the path once you see where it took you. But in the moment, I go, I can't even embrace these circumstances, but I embrace that I'm here now. It was like a little man, we're talking about the Beatles, right? It's like a little man just came in with a little Windex and just quick, just started squirting the lens of my glasses, and all of a sudden it's like, boom. I could see all this stuff that was around me, all this goodness that was around me that my victimhood had blinded me to seeing. I actually wrote a song about it called Glory I Couldn't See. And that song is all about, yeah, I lost my job. And yeah, I couldn't go out and be with friends. But oh man, the relationship time I had building with my 4 daughters, I never would have gotten that. And it's not this like naive, just pretend everything's okay. No, it was actually properly mourning what I'd been through opened up my ability to have joy. That's kind of a misnomer too. We think no sadness, all joy. But the secret to joy is you have to open up your propensity for sadness and hurt. Like the problem with hope is that it increases your capacity for hurt. But the beautiful thing about opening up your ability to be hurt is you get the other side, which is joy and celebration too.
It's like being content in all circumstances, right? I mean, that's kind of what I think is being described there. I think it's Paul that talks about that, and being content in all circumstances. And James, certainly, and considering it joy, which is like the popular, cool, hip verse I think that everybody brought into COVID in 2020 was, consider it joy when you face trials of many kind. And there were so many trials, but that's real. That's kind of where you're going, right?
Yeah, and ironically, it isn't this squash any sad feelings you have. It's no, really grieve it. See, when I'm being a victim, I'm resisting my current circumstance. I'm numbing. I'm numbing.
Yeah.
And the second you go, oh no, this actually did mean a lot to me, and you mourn it. You can't have the wedding unless you have the funeral.
Yeah.
So mourn what you've lost so that you can actually embrace where you are and start to see the wedding.
He is Mike Donehey. I did want to ask you a couple questions about sports.
Sports.
One that we didn't talk about, because we're at a conference with lots of athletes, and it's probably kind of interesting for you to be at a conference and meet a lot of athletes, some that are probably well known to our audience. We won't give away who, but some that aren't, but just the lifestyle and how neat it is to kind of bring them into, because that happened for me too when I started working at ESPN, certainly now on PAO and Sports Spectrum, and being able to be in this world with these athletes, but not to be like them, but to just see them for who they really are.
Yeah, and honestly, this conference has been amazing because the commiseration level is much higher than I thought it would be. I go, oh, these guys, we have nothing in common. And I go, oh, wait, no, we travel, we're away from our families. Oh, wait, we're always struggling with feelings of irrelevance.
Right.
We're always struggling. Was that the best season I'll ever have? Was that the best album I'll ever make? Is it just a downward cruise control from here? Do I have to retire? Are people sick of me? Like, all those deep inner questions we all wrestle with. And the nice thing about athletes, we host our band for years and years hosted a golf tournament, and we'd have a lot of professional athletes and golfers. It was always fun because typically the athletes want to be musicians and the musicians want to be athletes. So it's a nice sort of, we both want to be in each other's shoes a little bit. So it's a good feeling of community.
Well, the Stuart Sink story that you shared to the athletes, I thought was one that, if you feel led to, share it with our audience, because I think there's a real lesson there to learn.
Yeah, it's just I think we all have to own up to the influence that we have, and that's tough because we're always kind of downplaying it. We either feel like we're being arrogant and overconfident, or this false humility of no, I don't, what I have to say doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we ran this golf tournament for years and years, trying to raise awareness and money for this organization called Compassion,
who is a partner of Sports Spectrum and a sponsor. So we love Compassion.
Well, Stuart Singh comes to our tournament, and he'd never heard of Compassion, and he goes, oh man, this is amazing. So then all of a sudden he's personally sponsoring a whole village, and then he goes on the Golf Channel, and I mean, in moments they raise more money for Compassion than we had our entire music career. So there's sort of this really rad humility of going, wow, you guys do carry a lot of influence in the culture.
Yeah.
And I think you could feel very burdened by that or see it as a unique privilege and opportunity.
Yeah, to leverage that for the gospel and to point people to Christ. Like, how awesome is that? I think a lot of athletes think they're influence doesn't matter, but I've seen it firsthand with Adam Wainwright, who we both know a little bit, and Adam is part of our conference, and Adam once shared something about this Bible study plan that he was doing on Twitter, and he got like 30,000 people to come along with him and do this Bible reading thing. It's like, what?
And for the people listening who go, well, then see, so these pro athletes, they should be tweeting, they should be doing things. I'm not going to do anything. Kids ask me all the time, oh, I wish I could have the platform that you have. And I always go, how many followers do you have right now?
Right.
And they go, oh, I only have 324 followers. I go, man, you are crushing Jesus right now. He only had 12. I mean, yeah, he spoke in front of thousands, but I mean, he had 12 disciples. I go, so the math here for me, the metric is you could have 12 legit followers and it could carry more influence than, preaching to thousands. So whatever sphere you're in, you need to own up to the influence you have, whether it's in 12 people's lives or whether it's in 12,000. It's still an awesome privilege.
I agree. Use your platform wisely. Know that you have a platform no matter what level it's at, and use it for good. I'm curious for you, was there a person, maybe athlete, or it could be a celebrity outside of the sports world, that when you found out they listened to your music, you were like, oh gosh, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize it. Maybe they listened to my music. Was there a moment where you had that, where you went into someone or you were like, oh my God, you guys know our music? I mean, a lot of people know your music, but still.
I'd love to share a specific story. It's just every time someone says they listen to my music, I'm boggled.
So it doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or not.
I mean, yeah.
That's a good place to be though, Mike.
I would say the first one that got us, it wasn't an athlete. I think it was 2010.
Okay.
And Ariana Grande tweeted us. And
That's
said,
cool.
Your song By Your Side helped me get through middle school or something like that.
Wow.
And we went, well, it's funny. At the time, I think she was still on a Mouseketeer or something. And we're kind of like, oh, that's funny, And then you look back, you go, oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Look at the platform she has. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the more you have athletes or other musicians or whoever, you're just like, oh, you're all people.
Why are you blown away that anybody listens to your music? I find that fascinating.
Well, you asked at the beginning, you were asking earlier what's different in the music industry. There's just so much music and so much great music that I'm constantly going, it's not a matter of like inferiority complex. It's just mind-boggling that of all the songs you could listen to, it's not like, it'd be like for an NFL player, imagine if there was 10,000 NFL teams.
Right.
And someone was a fan of yours.
Right.
You go, that's amazing. Multiply that by 100. I mean, I think there's some crazy statistic of how many millions of songs are added to Spotify every day.
That's a great point.
I'm sure that's not the real statistic, but it's crazy. And I'm not listening to myself. I'm listening to other people. And so I'm going, oh, you listen to me? Well, you could listen to them, right? Because they're awesome.
That's a great point, because I look at it the same way with the podcast. And I guess I kind of answered my own question when I heard you answer it, because I'm always blown away when somebody says, hey, I love your show, I listen to your pod. And I'm like, there's like 1 million podcasts out there. I mean, you talked about creating music in your basement. All you need is a good mic and a laptop like we're doing right now, and you can have a podcast. Yeah. And you go to wherever, Anchor or somewhere else, and boom, you have a podcast that everybody can listen to. So it's a different world. So I'm always kind of blown away too. But yeah, you just try to do good work, right?
But the weird thing is, by making it and putting it out, you are sort of audaciously expecting someone to hear it.
You hope so.
You're going, I think this song is good enough to put out in the world and deserves to be heard.
Right.
So it's that balance of being really humbled and grateful, but also being confident in what you're making,
Same thing when you wrote your book.
Yeah.
One person reads it, you're like, oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
How cool is that?
Yeah. And I mean, I hope 1 million people read it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth being read by 1 million people, but I'm also not. So it's the difference between, I think this speaks to sports and music, being expectant and having expectations.
Okay. The difference?
Huge difference.
Yeah.
So being expectant is, man, I hope this works out. And I would love for lots of people to listen to it. An expectation is it needs to be this many. If it's not this many, then it doesn't matter. And in sports, that's so easy.
Yeah.
We got to get to the playoffs. It's got to be this number.
Yeah, we got to win a Super Bowl if you're the Patriots every year.
So there's
right?
expectation, right, which is crushing. I mean, you look at Simone Biles, which just happened to her.
Oh, right.
I bet you up to this point, and I've read a couple, she's still not sure what was going on.
Yeah.
But when there's no pressure on you, you're expectant. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if I got a gold medal? But then the expectation becomes, after you win enough, no, you must have a gold medal. And the same thing happens with artists. When you first make a music, you're expectant. You go, man, wouldn't it be cool? But, oh, man, it's awesome. And then you get your first #1 hit, and you go, I can't believe it. This is incredible. And you were expecting that.
But your expectations are now a #1 for every single song, right?
Now the expectations are shifted.
And that's pressure.
And I've heard, I think it was Amy Grant, she said, true success in the music industry is when you're as excited to play shows at the end of your career in the same venues you were playing at the beginning of your career.
That's good.
And just listen to some of these athletes, like even especially baseball players, right? So you start in the minors, then you get to the majors, and then you get relegated to the minors.
Sometimes
the Premiership works that way in England. You can get relegated, and then you got to work your way back up. But to go, if I could get to a place in my music that I am as excited to play the game in the minors as I was in the majors, that frees me up to be brought up to the big leagues or downgraded or whatever, and I'm still playing the game.
I like expectant versus expectations. It's a huge difference in how we view anything that we do, whatever work it is. You have a podcast. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
So
Chasing the Beauty.
What's the expectations or expectant with the podcast?
Expectancy?
Expectancy, right?
The expectancy is to get to maybe pull back. So I grew up in the church, right? And one thing that kind of irks me is when I feel like we're getting into what I would call Christianese. A lot of people are familiar with that term. Yeah. Some of you may not be. But it's when you're speaking a different language. And I remember we worked with this one producer who, very openly did not believe the same things I believed. And it was a really beautiful challenge. I had to rework lyrics on songs because I said, well, if this doesn't make sense to you, then am I really talking to you, or am I just talking this insider club language?
Yeah, that's a great point.
So there was this challenge of I want to unpack things in ways that I feel like everyone can understand.
Interesting. So we got the podcast, we got the new album, Flourish, first solo album out in late August. Everybody should go get it.
It'll be great.
This is awesome, man. Thanks for coming back and coming on the show again. I always like talking to you and always have the honor for me to listen to you perform. So
thanks, man.
Appreciate you, buddy.
We hitting the table tennis court
Let's do it. We got some cornhole, too, we got to play.
Let's go, bro.
So, all right, dude. And many thanks to Mike Donehey, the former lead singer of 10th Avenue North, now a solo artist in a new album called Flourish, which is out now. Man, I love talking to Mike. He is such a deep thinker. And he's such a fun dude. Like, he can weave in comedy and humor and still go right to the core. In fact, going beneath the surface to really get to some of the things that we're all struggling with. And I'm just such a fan of Mike's. He was so gracious with his time to give us a few minutes to talk about his new album and just some of the things that God's been working on in his life. So really appreciate him. Give him a follow on Instagram and let him know that you heard him here today on Sports Spectrum. He's the best. Mike Donehey, former lead singer of 10th Avenue North. You can also listen to his music everywhere you listen to music. I like to listen on Spotify, and that new album is right there. You can go listen to it. Just stream it in the background while you're working, in the car, wherever it may be. Check out Mike Donehey's new album called Flourish, out now. We're thankful for you that you tuned into today's podcast. Do us one quick favor. Rate and review and subscribe to this Sports Spectrum podcast. It helps you stay in tune to all of the episodes that we release. We're 3 or 4 episodes deep every single week, and we don't want you to miss what we have for you here at Sports Spectrum. So rate and review, and make sure you subscribe and follow along with us here at Sports Spectrum's podcast. And then check out our website, sportspectrum.com, for all of our content. Sign up for the weekly newsletter and make sure you make sportspectrum.com a place to bookmark every single day. There's new content, there's devotionals, there's articles, there's stories. Yeah, we share them on our social media pages, but it's a heck of a lot easier if you just go to the website each day and catch up with all that we have going on here at Sports Spectrum. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you join us next time for a brand new episode here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.